For those who don't know, Young Americans for Freedom introduces students to the conservative ideas of free enterprise, limited government, traditional values, and a strong national defense. I chose to go to Notre Dame Law School because it prides itself on standing for the truth, even when it is unpopular. For example, when the Catholic Church officials turned down invitations to join Martin Luther King Jr.'s rally in Chicago, Father Hesburgh didn't cower to politically correct pressure to stay home. Instead, he joined to stand for the truth. Sadly, 55 years later, Notre Dame is not living up to that ideal. Instead of standing for the truth, even when it's unpopular, it caved to the politically correct pressure with its decision to cover the Columbus murals in the main building. Instead of conveying the message that Notre Dame is proud of its identity and desires to engage the campus community in dialogue, it cowered to revisionist history, conveying to countless visitors to this campus that we are ashamed of who we are.
Christopher Columbus had to pioneer not merely a geographic expedition, but a first ever matter of international diplomacy and domestic politics. Those who cast aspersions on the Admiral of the Ocean Sea right now might consider how they would have fared under such circumstances. Would they have fared perfectly? Would they have succeeded at everything they tried to do? Columbus's introduction of Spain to the New World was so significant for world affairs that he actually created a new ethnicity, Latinos. There would be no such thing as Latinos without Christopher Columbus. If you are a Latino, if you know a Latino, if you like a Latino, you have Christopher Columbus to thank for that. The people who want to get rid of Columbus, want to undo what Columbus did, might say if you like your Latinos, you cannot keep your Latinos. Entirely backwards. And this is the crux of why maligning our forebears is as ungrateful as it is ignorant. Because it must be nice. Mustn't it? It must be nice to sit in the freest, most prosperous, most charitable country in the history of the world, and from a position of totally unmerited luxury, slander the man who made it all possible, without even having the decency to read past a Vox.com headline on the subject. Cowards, ingrates, and moral narcissists throw tarp over the memory of the man without whom they would not exist. Those who have tracked Columbus's Christian piety in this brief history lesson will enjoy the coincidence that he died on the Feast of the Ascension in 1506. His last words echoed his Savior's, who said, "In manus tuas, Domine, commendo spiritu meum." Into your hands, Lord, I commend my spirit. Those who call him a murderer and a tyrant and whatever other nonsense they belch should consider some other words of Columbus, which he addressed to the Spanish sovereigns in his Lettera Rarissima. He wrote, quote, "Let those who are fond of blaming and finding fault, while they sit safely at home, ask, why did you not do thus and so? I wish they were on this voyage. I well believe that another voyage of a different kind awaits them, or our faith is naught." For those of you who didn't catch that last part, he's telling his preening detractors to go to hell, and so am I. Thank you very much.
I want to ask you, you talk a lot about the radical left. Would you lump Father Jenkins himself into that category, or do you believe that he has just kind of bought their arguments and hasn't really done enough in his own mind to kind of combat that? Would you consider him to be more of a victim of the radical left, or more of someone who you'd identify with that group you're describing, of course?
You know, while we're alive, we have will and we have the ability to do the right thing and to fight back against people who are trying to destroy liberal education. I would never presume to know Father Jenkins's motives as a university president covering up art and history, lest the ignorant and the unreasonable are offended by it. But certainly the action itself of taking beautiful, priceless murals by the Vatican portraitist at the entrance to a university in the United States and covering them up is a cowardly decision. It is anti-intellectual. It undercuts the entire spirit of education. and it is profoundly wrong and cowardly. I would never presume to know his motives. I would never presume to know his excuses for making that decision, but it is a terrible decision nonetheless.
Thanks for coming. My question is, so what do we do? Like, what's your suggestion and how do we, because the left obviously has control of like the education system, like what do we do to like take it back?
The educational system is pretty hard when you have university presidents encouraging the inmates to run the asylum and encouraging them to rip down the very basis of liberal education. And I don't mean only to pick on Father Jenkins. This has happened at my own alma mater of Yale University, where they encourage students to rip apart the curriculum, where now you can graduate with honors in the English department, having never read Shakespeare or Chaucer. This is not a problem unique to Notre Dame. It's true throughout the United States. Some university presidents have had courage and moral clarity, such as Mitch Daniels, the president of Purdue University, right here in Indiana. When the ridiculous anti-intellectual leftist mob came for him and tried to get him to cave on liberal education, he flatly told them no, and they've had no more insurrections, no more uprisings since then. I think some cowardly university presidents think that if they give the mob just a little bit, they give in a little bit to their commands, that then that'll be enough, because appeasement always works throughout history, doesn't it? Probably not.
Howdy. Thanks for giving this talk. I really enjoyed it, and I agreed with most of it, but I thought that there was one point you made that had some interesting implications. You said at one point that, or you decried the fact that this university was covering up art and history by covering up the murals. And I'm wondering what you think about that same logic being applied to Confederate statues in the South.
I think it's ridiculous to knock down history. I think it's absurd. I think we ought to face our history every day, the good, the bad, and the ugly. George Orwell writes about this very famously. I think it's Winston's line in 1984, that once the party has taken control, there will be no such thing as history. There will be no such thing as yesterday. And they'll have the best motives. They'll be doing the right thing as they say it. And ultimately, there will not be even truth itself, nothing but the ever-present political party. Ever-present, ever-changing. We're behaving like Stalin, erasing people out of official Soviet photos when we knock down those statues. It's absurd. It's a testament to the United States that the United States has overcome enslavement and exclusion and so much bigotry. It's a wonderful testament, and we should have those statues there to understand how we got here, to understand what those men were thinking, and to understand what has changed from now to then and how to preserve the gains that we have made while not destroying the tradition on which we all stand.
Haukola. My name is Mikey. I'm a member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe in South Dakota.
Are you related to Senatrix Warren or no?
No,
Okay.
Unfortunately not. My question is, so I personally think that the Columbus murals portray warts in history, obviously, which I think should be portrayed. Would you also support an alternative mural depicting Lakota people scalping settlers?
Scalping the settlers?
Tanyan Maniyo.
Could you describe, well, hold on, I want to speak with you. Okay, he doesn't want to answer. I suppose the question that he should answer is whether there is any comparison between some gratuitously violent display intending to degrade in the year 2019 some, I don't know if the fellow is even listening to the answer to his question. Probably because he doesn't want to learn a thing, does he? If there's any comparison whatsoever from a beautiful 19th century mural, 12 of them, painted by the Vatican portraitist of one of the greatest men in history, to some modern attempt to portray gratuitous violence, I actually have no problem with some mural going up somewhere of depicting some of the gratuitous violence of whatever tribe that gentleman wants to be depicted. If he wants to depict that as the historical reality to remember, that's fine by me. I see no problem with it. And broadly speaking, if people want more art, if people want more discussion of history, not the revision of history, not the replacement of history with fantasy, but the actual discussion of history, warts and all, and there's a lot of warts in history, That has my blessing. I think that's a wonderful thing. And actually, I'm not surprised that the sort of person who would ask a question of a lecturer and then run out of the room lest he possibly learn something by hearing the answer. Well, I'm not surprised at all that that sort of person would so clearly misunderstand the entire purpose of education.